Today's video and the companion article on my website ask what are the 7 questions to guarantee interactive presentations. This is the final video I've prepared this month in a series on engagement. I hope you've enjoyed the series. If you haven't seen all the other videos, then click below and you'll see the link to the previous 4 videos. Today's video is all about questions, and I very deliberately wanted a video about questions because it's one of the themes that's come up in each of the other videos. If you want to create engagement with your participants, ask and answer questions. And it was such an important facet in creating effective engagement in webinars that I wanted to have a separate video focusing on it and giving you tips and ideas on the questions and the types of questions that you can ask to create maximum engagement during your webinars. So let's dive in.
Let's get ridiculous!
The first of the questions that you want to be asking and answering during a webinar to create maximum engagement is the participant questions themselves. You want to actively stimulate questions from your participants about things they don't understand, things they'd like more information about. Ask and you shall receive. Ask the question, what questions do you have? Please tell me, I want to answer them. And further, the best practice solution to doing this is to answer the questions as soon as possible. Now, some webinar presenters like to get on a roll. They like to keep things easy. They like to keep it flowing and smooth. And frankly, they just might get too many questions to answer them during the webinar until the end. But if you've got a smaller group, if it's going to be manageable for you to answer questions as you move through the webinar, I encourage you to try that because it's very powerful in creating that quick real-time engagement with your participants. As an example, there might be a question that's asked in the first 5 minutes of the presentation. It might be holding back your participant. Until they get that answer, they might not engage fully with your webinar, or they may not understand what you're talking about because they missed an early step. If you can get in early and answer that question, or perhaps have a helper or an associate who answers that question on your behalf, that's going to be great news for that participant and maybe for other people who have the same question but who haven't asked it. So consider answering questions as soon as possible, but in either case, above all else, stimulate those questions. Ask your participants to provide you with those questions. The next one is rhetorical questions. Rhetorical questions are questions that you ask, but you don't expect an answer. Do you understand what I mean? That was an example of a rhetorical question. You ask the question, but I'm not expecting an answer right now. It's a question you ask to get people thinking. It might be as simple as saying, is this making sense to you? Or do you understand where I'm coming from with that? They're questions that might solicit a response, but you don't really expect it to, unless you ask for a response, of course, in which case it's not a rhetorical question. But don't hesitate to ask rhetorical questions. It's part of our language, it's part of what we do, it's a natural part of normal conversations, and it's a good thing in webinars because it's asking the question, it's getting people to think rather than listen to you talk. Ask a rhetorical question. It's powerful. Use them to advantage. The next type of question are statistical questions. Asking a statistical question is really interesting in terms of creating engagement because it gives people to think about, something to think about. My favorite type of statistical question is a percentage question where you ask about something and there's a percentage answer and you give your respondents, your participants, a chance to tell you what they think that answer might be. So for example, and this is one of my favorite questions, seriously, what percentage of online presenters don't wear pants when they present? Now, just for the record, I am wearing pants today. But questions like that can be very powerful in terms of getting answers back and stimulating discussion and keeping your participants engaged. The next type of question are audio or video response questions. So you play some audio, it might be some music or might be a quote or something, and then, or alternatively, you play some video and you ask questions about that audio or about that video. It's powerful in many ways because it gives your participants something different to listen to rather than your voice, and can also just capture their imagination because you're doing something different. It's a very powerful technique. Experiment with it, give it a go. Only the top shelf webinar presenters tend to use audio or video response questions, but I encourage you to use it. And it might be something that you recorded earlier. Check out your technology, come up with strategies. You might just have a CD player next to you and you record some of your webinar, 2 minutes of your webinar onto a CD, and you play that. And then you ask for a response about the passage they just heard. It doesn't have to be overly high tech, but experiment with that, play with it, see if that's going to help you create better engagement in your webinars. Another very powerful type of question relate to confirmation of learning. Ask your participants, are they understanding the content? Are they learning? Is this delivering the type of content they were expecting? Ask them how they're going. You will get feedback. Sometimes it might not be the feedback you're expecting, but that's probably when you need to hear it. So ask the question, make sure everyone is still on the train and that no one has fallen off your webinar train and that everyone is understanding where you are headed. You don't want to get to the next station and people have fallen off the train. So check in regularly to see if people are understanding and enjoying and comprehending the content. Permission questions are a clever one to ask during webinars. So rather than just presume that you have permission to do whatever you like during the 30, 60, 90 minutes of the webinar, or 3 hours, or whatever time frame you're working to, ask permission. So for example, if you're transitioning a webinar from education into a sales component, you might want to check with your webinar participants and ask them if you've provided value, if they're happy for you to move on and show them your product. That can be very valuable in securing their buy-in, so they're happy for you to move forward with that. Similarly, as an aside, if you're going to be moving on to a new topic or something different, just ask, is it okay if I move on now to this next topic? That can be very powerful in securing that buy-in and that commitment from your participants. And really tough questions is the final one. Sometimes we shy away from the really tough questions during a webinar. If you've got a tough question, ask the question. If you don't ask the question, you won't get the answer. You won't know. And quite often, that's an invitation to people to participate in your next webinar, or to purchase your product, or to tell me what I can do better to have improved this webinar. They can be tough questions for you to ask, but ask the question. If you don't ask, you won't get the answer. If you're a regular of these videos, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. But today I want to tell you about something that's not video content. Do you sometimes wish when you're in the car or on the gym or in the shower that you wish you had something to listen to so you could learn about webinars more effectively? If you're a webinar fanatic like I am and you want to get the chance to take advantage of those opportunities to do more learning, then there's a podcast for you, the Webinar Skills Podcast, hosted by yours truly. And I'm very excited about the Webinar Skills Podcast. It's only just been recently released and it's going great. So if you want the chance to listen to top class webinar presenters like John Lee Dumas, like Rick Mulready, like Joe Daniel, like George Cow and Kate Erickson, then tune into the Webinar Skills Podcast. You'll find it on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. Search for it, Webinar Skills Podcast, or click the link below to go to the Webinar Skills Podcast. Please have a listen to one of the episodes. I hope you love it. Well, we've come to the end of the road. That's the end of my 5 videos for the month of September, all about webinar engagement. I would love to know what you think about this series and how we could improve it, what other content I should have included, what your little golden nugget is as to how you create webinar engagement, something that we haven't covered. So please, down below the video on the YouTube page, please add a comment. Tell me what you think. I am dying to know what you think so that next time I create further videos about webinar engagement so that I can improve them and make them better for you and the other people who watch this channel and who support my articles on my website. Above all else, thank you very much for watching today's video. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, and have an awesome day. Let's talk about webinar engagement and why Jerry Seinfeld gets it.